The glass walls of the conference room felt like an aquarium. Everyone could see in, but I couldn't hear what they were whispering. My boss, Derek Vaughn, sat across from me with his hands folded on the table, his expression carefully blank. The HR representative sat beside him, her laptop open, her face rehearsed in professional sympathy. "Markham, this isn't an easy conversation," Derek began, his voice clinical and detached. "We're making some difficult decisions due to budget constraints. Unfortunately, your position is being eliminated effective immediately." The words landed like stones dropping into still water. Budget cuts. After 10 years. After 70-hour weeks and skipped vacations. After the biggest deal of my career that I'd closed just 3 weeks ago. "It's nothing personal," Derek continued, sliding a thin folder across the table. "Just business realities we all have to face." Through the glass, I could see my team pretending to work at their desks. Their eyes flickered toward the conference room, then quickly away. They knew what was happening. Everyone knew. The HR rep cleared her throat. "Your building access will be deactivated by noon. We'll need your laptop and security badge before you leave." My throat felt tight. I forced myself to nod, unable to form words that wouldn't betray the rage building in my chest. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. My name is Markham Steele. I'm 43 years old, and until that moment, I'd been a senior project lead at West Haven Dynamics for 10 years. A decade of loyalty, of sacrifice, of believing that hard work and integrity mattered. I was wrong. I'd spent the last 6 months building a relationship with Fortis Energy, one of the largest renewable energy companies in the region. The contract was worth $15 million, and it had been my project from the first cold call to the final presentation. Derek had attended exactly 2 meetings, nodding along like he understood the technical details, letting me do all the actual work. 3 weeks ago, Fortis had verbally agreed to the deal. We were days away from signing the final contract. I'd thought it was my moment, the achievement that would finally earn me the promotion I'd been chasing for years. Instead, here I was, being escorted out of the building like a security risk. I walked past my desk where a cardboard box already sat waiting. Someone from facilities must have brought it up while I was in that glass room being terminated. The efficiency of my erasure was almost impressive. I packed quickly. Family photos. My coffee mug. A small plant that had somehow survived a decade under fluorescent lights. My team members kept their heads down, typing frantically at their keyboards, pretending they couldn't see me disappearing. At home, I set the termination folder on the kitchen table. The thin manila envelope seemed to mock me with its lightness. Inside was a severance agreement offering 1 month's salary, a non-disclosure agreement, and a brief thank you note that wasn't even signed by Derek himself, just his assistant's printed signature. I sat there staring at the documents as afternoon light faded through the windows. My reflection in the darkening glass looked hollow, like someone had scooped out everything that made me who I was and left just the shell behind. My wife, Caroline, came home from work and found me sitting in the dark. She didn't turn on the lights, just sat down across from me and waited. "What really happened?" she asked finally, her voice gentle. I looked at her, trying to organize my thoughts into something coherent. "I think Derek used me to get the deal approved, then got rid of me before I could take any credit for it." The words sounded paranoid even as I said them, but Caroline's expression told me she believed me. She'd watched me work late nights and weekends for years. She knew what I'd sacrificed for that company. "What are you going to do?" she asked. I didn't have an answer yet. That night, I drafted an email to my former team. Professional, brief, thanking them for years of collaboration. I wanted to end it with something meaningful, something that would make clear what had really happened without directly accusing anyone. I typed, "I'm proud of what we built together, and I hope the new leadership continues to honor integrity over convenience." My finger hovered over the send button for a long time. That last sentence felt dangerous, a thinly veiled accusation that could be used against me if anyone wanted to pursue it. The NDA I'd been given was broad enough to cover almost any criticism of the company or its management. I highlighted the sentence about integrity and deleted it. I wasn't ready to burn bridges, not until I understood exactly what Derek had done and whether I had any recourse. Making accusations I couldn't prove would only make me look bitter. I sent the email with just the professional pleasantries and closed my laptop. The satisfaction I'd expected from getting the last word never came. I just felt empty. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I kept replaying the meeting in my head, searching for signs I should have seen earlier. Derek's too casual interest in my Fortis files. His questions about my methodology. The way he'd started attending client calls toward the end of the project after months of disinterest. He'd been positioning himself to take over all along. The next few days passed in a strange, suspended silence. No calls from former colleagues. No messages checking if I was okay. It was like I'd been erased from West Haven's collective memory the moment I walked out the door. I spent my mornings applying for jobs and my afternoons trying not to obsess over what was happening at the company I'd left behind. But I couldn't help checking LinkedIn, scrolling through posts from people I'd worked with for years. That's when I saw it. A post from Derek, published 3 days after my termination. Excited to share some thoughts on operational efficiency, doing more with less. Sometimes the hardest decisions are the most necessary for long-term growth. The post had 47 likes and a dozen comments congratulating him on his strategic leadership and tough choices. People I'd trained. People I'd mentored. All of them validating Derek's narrative that firing me had been some kind of brilliant business move. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the comments. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked what doing more with less actually meant or who had paid the price for this supposed efficiency. I closed the laptop before I could type something I'd regret. But I whispered to the empty room, "So that's the story you're telling." Late one night, about a week after my termination, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Trevor Hancock, one of the senior analysts I'd worked with at West Haven. We'd been friendly but not close, office acquaintances who'd grab lunch occasionally but never socialized outside work. "Markham, I'm calling off the record," Trevor said, his voice low and tense. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I thought you deserved to know." My pulse quickened. "Know what?" "Derek didn't cut the budget. He just reassigned your client. Fortis Energy, the deal you spent 6 months building, he's taking full credit for it. He's telling everyone it was his strategic vision from the beginning." The confirmation of what I'd suspected hit harder than I expected. He's using my work. He's using everything. Your proposal, your presentations, your client relationship. He even renamed a few slides, but it's the same document you created. I saw the template in the shared drive. I closed my eyes, feeling something cold settle in my chest. He didn't even bother to rewrite it. Trevor sighed. "That's not even the worst part. He's telling the executive team that eliminating your position freed up resources to close the deal. He's making it sound like you were holding the project back." After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. The betrayal was complete now, confirmed. Derek hadn't just fired me, he'd stolen my work and rewritten history to make himself the hero. I couldn't stop thinking about the Fortis presentation. I'd spent weeks perfecting it, running simulations and building financial models that proved beyond doubt that our solution was superior to any competitor. The night before the final pitch, I'd rehearsed until 3 in the morning, anticipating every possible question. The presentation itself had been flawless. The Fortis executives had sat in respectful silence as I walked them through the data, their expressions shifting from skepticism to genuine interest. By the end, their CEO had been nodding, already mentally committed. Derek had been there, sitting in the corner of the conference room. He'd said maybe 10 words the entire meeting, just nodding along like he understood every technical detail I was explaining. Afterward, he'd patted my shoulder and said, "You make this look easy, Mark. Wish I had your gift for simplifying complex concepts." At the time, I'd taken it as a compliment. Now I understood it for what it was, an acknowledgement that he couldn't do what I did, paired with the calculation that he didn't need to. He just needed to wait until the deal was close enough to signing, then remove me from the equation and take credit. The memory made my stomach turn. I'd been so focused on landing the contract that I'd never seen the real threat wasn't losing the deal, it was losing my place in it. Weeks passed. My severance ran out faster than I'd expected. I started taking small consulting gigs, helping local businesses with project management and proposal development. The work was fine but felt hollow compared to what I'd been doing at West Haven. Every morning, I still woke up at 6 o'clock, my body conditioned by a decade of routine. For those first confused moments between sleep and consciousness, I'd forget what had happened. Then reality would crash back, and I'd lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Caroline tried to be supportive, but I could see the worry in her eyes when she thought I wasn't looking. Our daughter's college tuition was due in 3 months. The consulting work wasn't bringing in nearly enough to cover our bills, let alone unexpected expenses. But worse than the financial stress was the sense of unfinished business. The Fortis deal had been my legacy project, the culmination of everything I'd learned in a decade at West Haven. It was supposed to prove that loyalty and hard work still mattered, that doing things right was worth the sacrifice. Instead, it had proven that the person willing to lie and steal would win while the person who actually did the work got erased. I couldn't let go of that injustice. It haunted me. I was updating my resume one afternoon when I remembered the backup drive. Before leaving West Haven, I'd copied my personal files, project documents I'd created, presentations I'd developed, research I'd compiled over the years. It was standard practice, keeping samples of your work for your portfolio. I dug through my desk drawer until I found the small USB drive, then plugged it into my laptop. The files loaded slowly, folders organized by project and date. I navigated to the Fortis folder and opened the final proposal document. The file opened, and there it was, 53 pages of analysis, projections, and strategic recommendations. My work. My words. My vision for how West Haven could transform Fortis Energy's operations. Then I noticed something in the document properties. At the bottom of the screen, in small gray text, was the metadata. Author, M. Steele, last edited by, D. Vaughn. My heart started pounding. The document had been created by me, but Derek had edited it. That meant he'd taken my file, made some changes, and then submitted it as his own work. Every copy that came from this file would carry that metadata, permanently embedding my authorship into the document's code. If Derek had used this exact file to finalize the Fortis deal, then somewhere in West Haven's systems, or Fortis's systems, there was a contract with my digital fingerprints all over it. I spent the next hour examining the document properties. My embedded digital signature was still there, created automatically when I'd first saved the file on West Haven's system. The signature was tied to my employee ID, time-stamped with the date I'd created the document. Derek had been careless. He'd taken my work, made surface changes to the content, but hadn't thought to scrub the metadata. Why would he? He probably assumed that once I was gone, nobody would ever check who'd really authored the proposal. But I had the original. I had proof. I printed the document, then highlighted my signature on the cover page, the embedded digital ID that proved this work was mine. My hands were steady now, the shock and anger from weeks ago replaced by something colder and more focused. Derek had hanged himself with his own arrogance. He'd stolen my work, fired me to cover his tracks, and then used my exact files to close the deal. All I had to do was wait for the right moment to reveal what he'd done. I whispered to the empty room, "You hung yourself, Derek." For the first time since my termination, I felt something like hope. Not revenge, exactly. Justice. The quiet certainty that truth would eventually catch up with lies, and when it did, Derek's carefully constructed narrative would collapse. A few weeks later, I got a call from a small renewable energy consulting firm. They needed someone to review public contracts and assess potential opportunities for their clients. The pay was modest, but it would keep me in the industry and give me access to contract databases I'd need for my own job search. I accepted the position and started the following Monday. The office was smaller than West Haven, the team younger and less experienced. But there was something refreshing about working with people who valued collaboration over politics, who shared credit instead of stealing it. My primary responsibility was reviewing recently awarded contracts in the renewable energy sector, identifying trends and opportunities. It meant spending hours each day scrolling through government databases, reading proposals and bid documents, analyzing award justifications. It was tedious work, but I was good at it. And more importantly, it kept me connected to the world where Derek was still operating. If he made a mistake, when he made a mistake, I'd be positioned to see it. I didn't tell anyone at my new firm about what had happened at West Haven. I kept my story simple. I'd left for better opportunities. They didn't need to know about the betrayal or the stolen work. That was my business, my vendetta to settle when the time was right. It happened 3 months after my termination. I was reviewing a list of recently awarded federal contracts for a client presentation when a familiar name jumped out at me. Project, Fortis West Haven Renewable Expansion Award Amount, $15 million Prime Contractor, West Haven Dynamics Lead Consultant, Markham Steele. I stared at the screen, my coffee cup frozen halfway to my mouth. My name. Right there in the official government contract database, listed as the lead consultant on a project I'd been fired from months ago. I refreshed the page, thinking it must be an error. But no, the information was still there. According to the federal contract records, I was officially the lead consultant on a $15 million deal for a company that had terminated me for budget cuts. My hands trembled as I clicked through to the full contract documents. There was my proposal, uploaded as the primary supporting documentation. There was my analysis, my projections, my strategic recommendations, all officially submitted with my name attached. Derek had been even more careless than I'd imagined. He hadn't just kept my metadata in the files. He'd submitted the entire proposal package with my name still listed as the project lead. Either he'd forgotten to change it, or he'd been in such a rush to claim credit that he'd overlooked this critical detail. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. This wasn't just sloppy, it was potentially illegal. I spent the rest of that day digging deeper into the submission logs. Every document Derek had filed with the contracting agency bore traces of my authorship. The metadata showed my employee ID. The digital certification was tied to my credentials. Even the electronic signatures on some forms were generated using my login information. Derek had essentially committed forgery without realizing it. He'd taken my work, submitted it under his authority, but left a trail of evidence proving he hadn't actually created any of it. The question was what to do with this information. I could go public immediately, contact the contracting agency, file a complaint with West Haven's board. But that felt too reactive, too emotional. If I went in angry and accusatory, I'd look like a bitter ex-employee trying to cause problems. No, this required a different approach. Careful. Methodical. Professional. I thought about who I knew at Fortis Energy. There was Susan Carver, a compliance officer I'd worked with during the initial contract negotiations. She'd been impressed by my attention to detail, my insistence on following proper procedures. We'd developed a professional rapport based on mutual respect for doing things correctly. I composed an email to Susan, keeping my tone neutral and curious rather than accusatory. Hi Susan, I hope this finds you well. I've been doing some contract review work and noticed something unusual. Is it standard for terminated employees to remain listed as lead consultants on active federal contracts? just trying to understand the proper procedures. I read the email 3 times before sending it. No accusations. No emotional language. Just a simple question from one professional to another. Susan's response came 2 days later. The email was brief but telling. Markham, thank you for bringing this to my attention. No, that is definitely not standard procedure. In fact, it raises serious compliance concerns. I'm forwarding your question to our internal audit team. They may want to speak with you directly. I felt something settle in my chest, not satisfaction exactly, but vindication. I'd made the right choice by approaching this professionally. Now the system would do what it was designed to do, investigate irregularities and hold people accountable. Within a week, I received a call from Fortis's audit department. They wanted copies of any documentation I had regarding my work on the contract. I provided everything, the original proposal files with metadata, my project notes, email correspondence showing my role in developing the client relationship. The auditor's questions were pointed and thorough. When had I last worked on this project? When was I terminated? Had I authorized anyone to use my credentials after my departure? Had I signed off on the final contract submission? To every question, I gave clear, factual answers. No embellishment. No accusations. Just the truth, documented and verifiable. By the end of the call, the auditor's tone had shifted from skeptical to concerned. Mr. Steele, this information is very helpful. We'll be conducting a formal review of all documentation submitted by Westhaven Dynamics. Someone will be in touch if we need additional information. I hung up and allowed myself a small smile. The first ripple had started. Over the next few weeks, I watched the ripples spread. Through Trevor and other contacts still at Westhaven, I heard whispers about auditors requesting files, lawyers asking questions, IT being instructed to preserve all project documentation. Derek apparently didn't suspect anything serious at first. Trevor told me he'd seen Derek in the hallway, still confident, still posting his leadership insights on LinkedIn. He'd even published an article about efficient resource management that barely disguised his pride in having fired me. But then the auditors showed up in person. They spent 3 days at Westhaven's offices, interviewing staff and reviewing files. Derek's confidence began to crack. He held an emergency meeting with his team, demanding they organize documentation and ensure consistency in all records. Too late. The auditors already had what they needed, my original files, complete with metadata proving authorship. Derek's edited versions, showing he'd made only surface changes. The submission records showing my name listed as lead consultant on a project I'd been fired from months before the contract was awarded. Trevor called me one evening, his voice urgent. Markham, something's going on. Derek's panicking. He's been locked in meetings with legal all day. Apparently, there's some issue with the Fortis contract, and your name keeps coming up. I kept my voice neutral. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. These things usually work themselves out. But I knew better. This wasn't working itself out. This was falling apart, slowly and inexorably, like a building with structural damage finally beginning to collapse. The breaking point came about 6 weeks after my initial email to Susan. Derek, apparently on advice from Westhaven's legal team, tried to fix the problem retroactively. He called an emergency meeting with IT, demanding they update the metadata on all Fortis-related files. He wanted my name scrubbed from every document, every submission, every record. He told them it was a simple administrative correction, nothing more. But IT explained that changing metadata on documents already submitted to federal agencies wasn't just unethical, it was illegal tampering with government records. The auditors already had copies of the original files. Any changes now would only make things worse. According to Trevor, who heard this from someone in IT, Derek had shouted, "I didn't forge anything. I just used the company's resources to complete a project after staff changes. That phrase, "I didn't forge anything," spread through West Haven like wildfire. People don't usually protest about forgery unless someone has accused them of it. The denial raised more questions than it answered. I read about the incident in a private industry newsletter the next day. The newsletter didn't name Derek specifically, but it referenced compliance concerns at a major renewable energy contractor and questions about proper attribution on federal contracts. The story was getting too big to contain. And Derek's attempts to cover his tracks were only making it more obvious that he had something to hide. A week later, I received an official email from the contracting agency's compliance division. They wanted to schedule an interview to discuss my role in developing the Fortis proposal and to clarify the timeline of my employment at West Haven. I agreed immediately and spent a day preparing. I organized every piece of documentation chronologically: my hire date at West Haven, my assignment to the Fortis project, the development of the proposal, my termination date, and the contract award date. Everything was supported by timestamps, emails, and official records. The interview took place via video conference. 3 investigators asked questions while a lawyer took notes. Their questions were specific and pointed, clearly designed to establish a timeline that would either support or contradict West Haven's submitted documentation. "Mr. Steele, according to our records, you're listed as the lead consultant on a contract that was awarded 2 months after your termination from West Haven Dynamics. Can you explain that discrepancy?" "I can't explain it," I said honestly. "I created the original proposal while I was employed at West Haven. After my termination, I had no further involvement with the project or the company. If my name appears on documents submitted after that date, it wasn't with my knowledge or authorization." "And did you give Mr. Vaughn permission to use your credentials or digital signatures on any submissions?" "Absolutely not. I turned in my laptop, security badge, and access cards on my last day. I had no ability to authorize anything after that point." They asked more questions about the technical details of the proposal, questions only the actual author could answer in depth. I answered each one precisely, demonstrating knowledge that couldn't be faked or borrowed. By the end of the interview, the lead investigator's expression had hardened. "Thank you, Mr. Steele. Your testimony has been very helpful. We'll be issuing our findings within 30 days. I didn't have to wait 30 days to see consequences. Within 48 hours of my interview, West Haven issued a press release announcing that Derek Vaughn had been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The announcement was carefully worded, avoiding specifics while making clear that serious concerns had been raised. West Haven's stock price dropped 3% that day as investors tried to understand what was happening. Industry blogs picked up the story, speculating about what kind of investigation would require suspending a director-level executive. Some reporters connected it to the Fortis contract. Others suggested financial impropriety. The truth was somehow worse than any of the speculation: simple theft and arrogance dressed up as strategic leadership. Trevor called me that evening. "It's chaos here. People are choosing sides. Some are defending Derek, saying this is just corporate politics. Others are saying they always knew something wasn't right about your termination. What do you think?" I asked. "I think you documented everything, played it perfectly, and now Derek's facing the consequences he should have seen coming." Trevor paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. When you were fired, I knew it didn't make sense, but I kept my head down. I should have said something." "You called me when it mattered," I said. "That's what counts." After we hung up, I sat on my back porch watching the sun set. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired, like I'd been carrying something heavy for months and finally set it down. West Haven's board of directors convened an emergency meeting 2 weeks after Derek's suspension. By that point, the compliance agency had shared their preliminary findings with the company's legal team. The evidence was devastating. Derek had submitted my proposal using my original files, with my metadata intact, and my name listed as project lead, all while I was no longer employed by the company. He'd either forged my digital signatures on some documents or had IT staff replicate them without proper authorization. He'd then taken credit for the contract award, using it to justify my termination as a successful, cost-cutting measure. The board had three options: defend Derek and risk federal penalties for the company, settle with the contracting agency and acknowledge wrongdoing, or terminate Derek and cooperate fully with investigators. They chose the third option. Derek was fired for cause, meaning no severance package, no positive references, no golden parachute. His termination letter, which somehow leaked to industry blogs within hours, cited falsification of documentation, misappropriation of intellectual property, and conduct inconsistent with company values. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Derek had fired me claiming budget cuts while stealing my work. Now he was being fired for exactly what he'd actually done. West Haven's statement tried to distance the company from Derek's actions, characterizing him as a rogue executive who'd acted without authorization. But the damage was done. Clients started questioning whether they could trust West Haven's integrity. Several contracts were frozen pending ethics reviews. The news broke publicly a week after Derek's termination. A business journal ran the story under the headline, West Haven Dynamics under federal review for contract irregularities. The article detailed the timeline, my termination, the contract award, the discovery of my name in official documents, the investigation, and Derek's firing. It stopped short of calling it fraud, but the implications were clear. My phone started ringing within hours. Former colleagues reaching out to apologize or express shock. Recruiters suddenly interested in someone who'd been terminated for budget cuts. Reporters asking for interviews about my experience. I declined all interview requests. This wasn't about public vindication or revenge theater. It was about something simpler, justice. The truth had come out, documented and official. That was enough. Caroline found me reading the article on our back porch that evening. "How do you feel?" she asked, sitting beside me. I thought about the question. Like gravity just caught up. Derek built his success on lies and stolen work. Eventually, that catches up with you. The weight of it becomes unsupportable. She squeezed my hand. "I'm proud of you. You could have handled this so many different ways. You chose the right path." I looked at her, this woman who'd watched me struggle through months of unemployment and uncertainty without once suggesting I should just let it go. "Thank you for believing me when I said something was wrong. I always knew you were too good at what you do to be fired for real reasons," she said. "I just didn't know how you'd prove it." The call came 3 weeks after the public fallout. Susan Carver from Fortis Energy, the compliance officer who'd first taken my concerns seriously. "Markham, I wanted to thank you personally for bringing this situation to our attention. Your professionalism throughout this process has been remarkable." "I just told the truth," I said. "You did more than that. You handled a difficult situation with integrity and patience. Which brings me to why I'm calling. Fortis is looking for someone to oversee compliance and quality control for our federal contracts. We need someone who understands both the technical side and the importance of proper procedures. Your name came up immediately. My heart started racing. You're offering me a position? I'm offering you an interview for Director of Contract Compliance. The role would involve reviewing all our federal submissions, training staff on proper documentation procedures, and serving as our primary liaison with contracting agencies. Interested? I was more than interested. This was the position Derek had been lobbying for before everything collapsed, a senior role with one of the industry's largest companies. And they were offering it to me because I'd demonstrated exactly the qualities the role required: attention to detail, ethical standards, and calm professionalism under pressure. I accepted the interview, which led to a second interview, which led to an offer. 6 months after being fired for budget cuts, I was starting a new position that paid 30% more than my old salary and came with actual respect for my expertise. On my second week at Fortis, I received an email from an unfamiliar address. When I opened it, I recognized the writing style immediately. "Markham, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I just wanted to say that you could have handled this differently. We could have talked. We could have worked something out. This didn't have to destroy my career." It was from Derek. No apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just resentment that I'd exposed his theft instead of letting it slide. I stared at the email for a long time, considering responses. I could explain how his actions had affected my life, how months of unemployment had strained my family, how his theft had tried to erase my contributions to a project I'd built. But what would be the point? Derek wasn't interested in understanding what he'd done wrong. He was interested in being forgiven without making amends, in escaping consequences he'd earned. I forwarded the email to the investigators as one final piece of documentation. Then I deleted it from my inbox. No reply. No engagement. Just silence. Derek had spent months erasing me from West Haven's history, making me invisible, pretending my work had never existed. Now I was returning the favor. He didn't deserve my anger or my forgiveness. He didn't deserve my attention at all. The compliance agency completed their full audit 3 months after my interview with them. Their report was comprehensive and damning. Derek had falsified multiple documents, misappropriated intellectual property, and submitted contracts under false pretenses. His actions had put West Haven at risk of federal penalties and damaged the company's reputation. West Haven settled with the agency, paying fines and agreeing to implement new oversight procedures for all future contract submissions. They never got to work with Fortis Energy again. That bridge was permanently burned. Derek himself faced professional consequences that extended beyond his termination. He was blacklisted from federal contract work. Industry groups quietly circulated his name as someone with integrity issues. His LinkedIn profile, once full of leadership posts and strategic insights, went dark. Meanwhile, I received a commendation from the compliance agency for my cooperation and professionalism during their investigation. The letter praised my commitment to ethical standards and transparent communication, noting that my actions had helped prevent further irregularities. I framed that letter and hung it in my office, not as a trophy but as a reminder. A reminder that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, eventually matters. That truth has weight that no amount of spin can erase forever. 6 months into my role at Fortis, I stood outside the company's headquarters one morning, my new security badge clipped to my jacket. The building was modern and glass-fronted, reflecting the morning sun in ways that made the whole structure seem to glow. I thought about standing in West Haven's conference room, watching through glass walls as my career apparently ended. I thought about the humiliation of being fired while my team pretended not to watch. I thought about months of unemployment, of struggling to understand what I'd done wrong. None of it had been about my performance. It had been about Derek's willingness to steal and my refusal to accept that theft as normal business practice. Now I stood outside a building where people valued integrity, where doing good work was recognized instead of stolen, where truth mattered more than political maneuvering. The reflection staring back at me from those glass walls wasn't humiliated anymore. It was composed. Professional. Someone who'd survived betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. I whispered to myself, "You don't fight fire with fire. You let arrogance burn itself out." Then I walked through the front doors, ready to start another day of work that actually mattered. People ask me sometimes if what happened to Derek was revenge. They want the story to be about destruction and payback, about bringing down someone who wronged me. But that's not what happened. I didn't destroy Derek. He destroyed himself. All I did was tell the truth when asked. I documented what had really occurred. I answered questions honestly. I let the evidence speak for itself. Derek's downfall came from his own choices, the choice to steal rather than create, to claim credit rather than earn it, to build a career on lies rather than substance. Those choices were always going to catch up with him eventually. I just accelerated the timeline by refusing to stay silent. I used to think loyalty meant accepting whatever your company did to you, staying quiet when you saw a wrongdoing, putting the organization above your own integrity. I was wrong about that. Real loyalty means standing up for what you built, refusing to let others erase your contributions, insisting that truth matters even when lies are more convenient. That kind of loyalty isn't to a company, it's to yourself and the work you do. Today, I lead a team at Fortis that values those principles. We review every contract with the same attention to detail I brought to that Fortis proposal years ago. We ensure that credit goes to the people who actually do the work. We build things that last because they're built on truth rather than manipulation. I close my laptop at the end of each day and go home to my family. I make it to my daughter's events. I sleep well at night. And I never wonder whether someone's about to steal my work, because I work with people who understand that integrity isn't negotiable. That's not revenge. That's peace. That's justice. That's knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it.